I worked tirelessly as a delivery driver for a period spanning 2 years. And during that tenure, I encountered a myriad of experiences. Yet, amongst the routine deliveries and uneventful transactions, there was one particular incident that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I recount it. It was a bright and sunny day, around 1 p.m., when I received an order for a delivery. The weather seemed inviting, and the prospect of a pleasant drive through the neighborhood lifted my spirits. Arriving at the designated address, nestled in a picturesque corner of the town, I stepped out of my vehicle and approached the quaint house. As I rang the doorbell, anticipation mingled with the warmth of the midday sun. To my surprise, the door swung open, revealing an elderly lady standing on the threshold. She leaned gently on a walker, her demeanor exuding a blend of fragility and resilience. With a smile, she greeted me and proceeded to hand over the requisite payment for the order. However, her request caught me off guard. She asked if I could assist her by placing the pizza on her kitchen table, citing the difficulty she faced in carrying objects due to her solitary state. Now, as a delivery driver, I was well aware of the strict protocols in place regarding entering customers' homes. Safety concerns loomed large, and such actions were generally discouraged. However, as I gazed upon the elderly woman before me, a wave of empathy washed over me. What if she were my own grandmother, in need of assistance from a stranger? With this thought weighing heavily on my conscience, I made a spur-of-the-moment decision and acquiesced to her request. Stepping over the threshold, I entered the cozy interior of her home. The ambience was inviting, yet there lingered an underlying sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake off. Placing the pizza on her kitchen table, I couldn't help but notice a faint thumping noise emanating from somewhere within the house. Dismissing it as the innocuous sounds of an aging abode, I carried on with the task at hand. The elderly lady expressed her gratitude and insisted on offering me an additional tip for my kindness. She excused herself momentarily, leaving me alone in the kitchen. It was then that the thumping noise returned, louder and more persistent this time. I called out to her, inquiring if she had heard anything, but she responded in the negative. As I waited, a sense of apprehension began to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. Another thud reverberated through the house, followed by an eerie, dragging sound emanating from the upstairs quarters. Sensing that something was amiss, I politely declined the offer of an extra tip, citing prior commitments and the need to attend to other deliveries. Making my way towards the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A gasp, barely audible, echoed from the top of the staircase adjacent to the entrance. My gaze darted upwards, catching a fleeting glimpse of movement before the figure retreated into the shadows. Hastily opening the front door, I bid the elderly lady farewell and practically sprinted back to my vehicle. Seated within the safety of my car, I spared a glance back at the house, only to find the elderly lady watching me from the doorway, her expression inscrutable. And then, in a moment of chilling uncertainty, I thought I saw a figure peering out from one of the upstairs windows, a silhouette etched against the backdrop of the dimly lit interior. Shaken to the core, I wasted no time in leaving the vicinity, my mind awash with a torrent of unanswered questions and unspoken fears. Upon recounting the harrowing encounter to my coworkers, I was met with skepticism and incredulity. Yet the lingering sense of disquiet persisted, a silent reminder of the inexplicable events that transpired within the confines of that seemingly innocuous house. To this day, the memory of that encounter remains etched in my mind, a testament to the unfathomable depths of the unknown and the primal instincts that guide us through the darkest of nights. And though I may never fully comprehend the truth behind those fleeting moments of terror, one thing remains certain. I will never look at a delivery assignment in quite the same way again. One fateful night, as the clock approached midnight, I found myself diligently serving a customer at the restaurant where I worked. The atmosphere was quiet, with only a few patrons lingering in the dimly lit establishment. Suddenly, the tranquility was shattered by the abrupt entrance of a disheveled woman who burst through the door with frantic urgency, her wild eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape route. Without warning, she began to shout incoherently, her words a jumbled mess of fear and desperation. Ignoring the startled stares of the other patrons, she made a beeline for the counter, her movements erratic and uncoordinated. In her haste, she attempted to leap over the barrier but misjudged her trajectory and collided with it instead, sending her sprawling to the ground in a heap of flailing limbs. As she struggled to regain her footing, the contents of her hand, a half-empty can of cider, went flying through the air, its sugary contents splattering across the floor and drenching me in an unpleasant, sticky mess. In that moment, frustration and annoyance welled up inside me, mingled with a sense of apprehension at the chaotic scene unfolding before me. With a resigned sigh, I resigned myself to dealing with yet another late-night disturbance, mentally bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation with this intoxicated stranger. But as I took in her disheveled appearance, the unkempt hair, the missing teeth, a nagging sense of unease gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Despite her unkempt appearance, there was something oddly out of place about her attire, a mismatched ensemble that seemed at odds with her disheveled appearance. It was as if she didn't quite fit the stereotype of the typical late-night reveler or homeless wanderer that frequented the streets at this hour. As I attempted to calm her frenzied state, I couldn't help but notice the fear in her eyes, the trembling of her hands as she clung to me with desperate urgency. She spoke of unseen pursuers, shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, their presence looming ever closer with each passing moment. At first, I dismissed her claims as the delusions of a troubled mind, the paranoid ramblings of someone in the throes of addiction or mental illness. But as she continued to plead for help, her words growing more frantic with each passing moment, a seed of doubt began to take root in my mind. Was it possible that she was telling the truth? That she was being pursued by some unseen threat, her life hanging in the balance as she sought refuge within the confines of our humble establishment? Or was she simply another lost soul adrift in the unforgiving tide of the night, her mind consumed by the demons that haunted her every waking moment? As I attempted to reason with her, to coax her into leaving the premises before the situation escalated further, she suddenly fell silent, her gaze fixated on some unseen horror that seemed to lurk just beyond the threshold of our reality. With a sense of resignation, she muttered a soft apology, her words barely audible above the din of the night. Then, as swiftly as she had entered, she was gone, disappearing into the darkness with the same frenzied urgency that had brought her here in the first place. I watched in stunned silence as she darted out the door and into the night, her figure swallowed up by the inky blackness that enveloped the world outside. For a brief moment, I stood rooted to the spot, the events of the past few minutes playing out in my mind like a surreal nightmare. But as the echoes of her departure faded into the night, I was left to grapple with the unsettling realization that I may have just borne witness to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. As the authorities arrived to collect her, I found myself unable to shake off the lingering sense of unease that hung heavy in the air. And as I glanced outside, my gaze fell upon a pair of shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, their eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Who were they, and what dark purpose had brought them here on this fateful night? It was a question that haunted my thoughts in the days and weeks that followed, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates the realm of the living from the abyss that lies beyond. And as I made my way home that night, I couldn't help but wonder if the woman's plea for help had been more than just the delusions of a troubled mind. If perhaps it had been a warning of the horrors that lurked just beyond the edge of our perception. I was taken to the southernmost end of the county, which seemed like a whole different country. There were big houses, but not much lighting and a lot of trees. There wasn't much activity, though. If I didn't see cars parked here and there, I'd think I was in the woods. Of course, the GPS malfunctioned, so I parked my van, trying to get my other phone to work. Suddenly, there was a knock on my window, which startled me. I looked to my left and saw this witch-like, ugly old white woman staring into my soul. Reluctantly, I rolled down the window and she asked if I had seen Jogger. It was a dog. Apparently everyone in the world knows that he is a dog because that's how she asked. I told her no, and she asked me to keep an eye out for it. I said okay, and she left. I hadn't rolled my window up yet, and about 30 seconds later, I heard this blood-curdling shriek. It scared me to my core, but I realized it was the same woman screaming Jogger. I am sure Jogger wasn't missing. Poor chap probably made a run for it from her. Who wouldn't? Another time, I was told to drive off in a Mercedes van, and as I am halfway to my first stop, I realize the rear camera screen is dead. As I touch it to find some button, it just drops and now is dangling. I call the dispatcher, and he basically tells me to carry on. I'll be fine. I said whatever. It's not like there are always cameras. I carry on with my route and avoid reversing much. If it takes more, it's their problem. Around 6:30 p.m., it's dark now, and I am in some no man's land. The house was at the end of the road, and I had no choice but to back up. It is pitch black. My headlights are the only lights. I back up at an angle, just waiting for some sound to tell me I have hit a wall. But instead, I feel like the van is about to fall. It's a weird feeling that I cannot describe, but it made me stop, and I got out of the van. The van was basically an inch from going off the road and down into oblivion. I don't know how deep the fall would be because it was so dark. I just stood there for a minute, thinking I could have died today delivering to people working for people who are serving the world's biggest ego. Another time, I went to deliver, and as soon as I reached 30 feet from the door, a dog comes flying out. I barely had time to register what kind of dog or how big. I just ran back to my van, throwing the package in the air at the house. I jump into the van from the open door and miss and hit my head and my foot in different places, but somehow make it in and shut the door. As I look at the house to see where the dog is, it is right where it was because it was leashed the whole time. The homeowners clearly wanted to laugh, and I don't blame them. I felt really stupid. Last one. This is almost 8 p.m. and I am about 20 stops from freedom. I am in a sketchy neighborhood, which is highly unusual for the place I live in. Nevertheless, I am delivering to various spots on the same street, and I notice a bunch of guys looking at me. I decide to just not let them out of my sight and quickly finish up. But only a stop later, a few of them decide to come to my van. I quickly run through my options. I am not giving up my life or limbs for Bezos. He can suck a lemon. And I am not trusting this bunch to come at me for advice on stock investment. So, I roll down the window and yell, "Get the heck out of my way or I'll run you over." And I just gun it. I didn't care if I did run them over, but I just hoped they'd get out of the way. And they did. Maybe overreaction, but I knew they were up to no good. And I was not taking any chances. I called the dispatcher and said I feel unsafe, and if they have a problem with that, they can deliver themselves. The rest of the stuff went back to Amazon, and I went home. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.